We just stepped on their face with a hobnail boot and broke their nose. We just crushed their face.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to the Glory UGA podcast, where on today's show, I'm going to explain why the Georgia Bulldogs might just be underrated entering the 2025 season based on some of these post-spring top 25s, top 20s that have been released in recent weeks. So we're going to be all over that today, guys. But if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe to the channel right now. All you diehards, this channel is for you. This show, this episode, everything we do on here is designed for all you diehard Georgia fans. So don't miss any of our content. Subscribe, turn those notifications on. Like, comment, let me know what you guys think. Is Georgia underrated coming into 2025, or are we properly rated? I'd love to get that conversation going, and check out full episodes of our show wherever you get your podcast. But all right, guys, let's get into this. We got a lot to talk about today. And we've reached that point in the college football offseason where we're far enough away from spring practice, but still far enough out from the start of the 2025 season that members of the college football media are having to dig real deep, y'all. They're digging real deep to try to generate some content, find some things to talk about. Trust me, I've been running this podcast. It's the 11th year that I've been running this podcast. The channel here is new over the past however many months, but the podcast we've been running for 11 years. So trust me, I feel it myself. I have for years this time of year. So what do people do in situations like that when they need content, but there's not much going on in the sport that they cover? Well, they put out post-spring rankings. They put out lists. This is the list season, right? And at the top of those lists they're putting out there are these post-spring rankings where they're just trying to generate some conversation. And that's exactly what we're going to feed into here today, guys. We're going to give them exactly what they want. We're going to talk about their rankings. But when you look at it, while Georgia, it's hard to call them underrated relative like the rest of the college football landscape because Georgia is still very highly thought of. Georgia is still generally viewed as a contender for the SEC title, for the college football playoff. Still a contender. I mean, the Dawgs currently, I just checked this last night, they're listed as the third betting favorite on most of those sports books out there, FanDuel, DraftKings, I think the ESPN app. They all have Georgia right now as the third betting favorite to win the national title. But despite that, there are some members of the media that I think are conspicuously low on the Dawgs coming into this new season, particularly guys like Joel Klatt and more recently, Josh Pate. And if you're not familiar with Josh Pate, he does a really good job with his podcast, guys. He's really come on to become a prominent voice in the college football media landscape. But when guys like Joel Klatt, the lead color guy for Fox, Josh Pate, whose podcast has grown in popularity over the years, does a great job. When prominent names of the college football media establishment, such as guys like that, are as down on the Dawgs entering the 2025 season relative to like certainly recent history, it begs the question, is Georgia being underrated entering this new season? Now, there's a lot of layers to this, guys, and I'm going to try to peel them all back one by one here. So bear with me. Look, guys, I know that I have a tendency to go deep on some of these things, but that's what we do here on this channel, okay? This channel is not for the faint of heart. This is not for the surface level casual sidewalk fan, the sidewalk alumni. That's not what this is for. This is for you diehards out there. So if you're a diehard Georgia fan, you're going to like this. If not, this channel might not be for you. I'd love you to stick around. Maybe you like the content, but we're going to go deep on this because that's what we do. That's kind of our brand here. So to answer that question of is Georgia underrated entering this 2025 season, I think you first have to understand, like you have to really dig deep and explore why. Why are these guys, these well-respected voices in the college football media world, why are they so down on Georgia? And it's not just them guys. Those are just two headliners. Of course, you got your rank and file college football fans who, Georgia's been on top for a while. I know we haven't won the national championship in either of the last 2 years, but we've been knocking on that door, won the SEC last year. So there's interest among fans out there to just knock a team like Georgia off, right? Like you want to see them fail. Like that's every team that's the top. All the other teams beneath them want to see them come down. So they're not alone. They're just two of the leading voices out there. But when you look at it, they are very down relative to recent history on a team that has won 2 of the last 4 national titles, a team that, let's not forget, y'all, just won the SEC championship 6 months ago in the first iteration of this new 16-team SEC conference, which got redundant. Southeastern Conference. And we did that after navigating one of the most difficult schedules in SEC football history. I mean, like objectively, guys, I know I run a Georgia podcast. I know I'm a Georgia guy, but objectively, go back and look at that schedule. That was one of the most difficult schedules that any SEC team has ever had when you throw Texas into that equation, going all on the road to Texas, all on the road to Alabama, all on the road to a top 10 caliber Ole Miss team. Yeah, that's a tough schedule. Playing Clemson, who's a college football playoff team, week 1. And we still, some way, somehow, managed to win the SEC despite that difficult schedule. So, look, you can't refute it. You can't refute their assertions that Georgia might not be as good this year if you don't know the reasons behind their rankings. And if you really, really want to know the reason behind their ranking, I think it's common sense that we go directly to the source, right? So let's do that. Let's go directly to what Josh Pate had to say. Because, look, guys, I'm not the kind of guy who will listen to a soundbite or see someone on social media and say, oh my God, Josh Pate has Georgia at number 11, which he does. Joel Klatt had Georgia number 8. That was released a month or so ago. And then Josh Pate said, hold my beer, watch this, put the Dogs at number 11 in his post-spring ranking. So when I say underrated, that's what I'm talking about, right? And I'm not somebody who's going to see a ranking and they'll say, oh my God, Josh Pate, you're an idiot. I have a lot of respect for Josh Pate. I think the guy does a really good job. So I went to the source. I went to the episode. I don't have a lot of time to listen to all these different podcasts, so I don't listen to Josh Pate a ton anymore. But I went and I checked out this episode because I wanted to see, what is your thinking? Why are you so down on Georgia? Is there something to what you're saying? Or are you a little off base here? So this is exactly what Josh Pate had to say about Georgia coming into 2025. I got a couple different quotes for you. He said, quote, this is what he led off with. Quote, Georgia's got to be able to run the ball, at least much better than they did last year. He also went on to say, quote, will they be able to run the football better while starting a new quarterback and reestablishing their identity defensively? And they wrapped it up by saying, if Georgia is to be what they're supposed to be running the football, if they are, Georgia is once again a national title contender. But we're talking about post-spring right now, so there's still a lot of question about that. Okay, all right. So those are the man's own words. So I want to take that item by item here and address each one of those contentions on why Georgia might not be as good this year according to Josh Pate. So let's start with the run game, the first thing he led with there. He isn't really wrong about our run game last year. Let's just call it what it is, guys. Call a spade a spade. Our run game was not good enough last year. It was a massive source of frustration for me. I know it was for you. It was a big part. We obviously had a lot of success last year, but it's a part of why we weren't able to have more success, maybe even go deeper in the college football playoff. The amount of yards we ran for last year, guys, it was the lowest in the Kirby Smart era, and it wasn't even close, by roughly 60 yards per game fewer than the next year where we were the next lowest in the Kirby Smart era. We were 15th out of 16 teams in the SEC in rush yards per game. That's not getting it done, guys. That is not Kirby Smart Georgia football. It's just not. We were a little bit better from an efficiency standpoint in yards per rush, but we were still only 11th in yards per rush, averaging only 4.06 yards per rush. So, yeah, you can see those raw numbers, and you can reasonably claim that ain't good enough, because honestly, it's not. It's not. I said as much all season long last year, but here's where I think Josh Pate falls a little short in that analysis. He's not wrong in saying our run game wasn't good enough last year. Spot on there. Totally agree. But I think where he goes wrong is projecting that forward into 2025, which is natural. Okay, Georgia wasn't going to run the ball last year. They're not going to be as good running the ball next year. At least it's a question. I need to see it. I understand that. But relying on those numbers from last year as a projection as to what's going to happen in 2025, I do think is short-sighted. I think that it's ignoring context around why Georgia wasn't as good running the ball last year. Again, we weren't good enough. We were not good enough on the ground, but while we were bad last year running the ball, that was the clear outlier in the Kirby Smart era. Even in recent history, guys, we've been top 3 in the SEC prior to last season. You go back 2021, 2022, and 2023. Those 3 years, we were top 3 in the SEC in rushing. And that includes the 2023 season, under Mike Bobo, the same offensive coordinator that was calling plays last year when we weren't running the ball as well. So the guy that, if you want to hammer Bobo and say, well, it's Bobo's fault, we couldn't run the ball last year. Well, we had no problem really running it in 2023. Same guy calling plays, right? So what was the issue last year? What was going on? And is that really something that's going to carry over into 2025 and lead Georgia to have a season that won't be up to the standard that we've set in recent years? Well, for me, it's pretty simple, guys. Why was Georgia having issues running the ball? It's multifaceted, but I think the biggest issue is that we were decimated by injuries on the offensive line. Injuries across the board offensively, but certainly on the offensive line. We had 3 starters miss at least 2 games. We had the backup for one of those guys. So Micah Morris takes over Tate Ratledge when Tate Ratledge goes down with his injury against Kentucky. Then Micah Morris goes out with an injury, and then we have to shuffle things around even more. And then even guys that were out there during games like Dylan Fairchild, for instance, who's probably going to start in the NFL this year, has a chance to start in the NFL this year. Even a guy like that who didn't miss games, he was so banged up all year long, the guy wasn't practicing. I had that on very good authority, guys, basically the entire back half of last year. The dude wasn't practicing. Ernest Green was starting for us for about 3/4 of the season at left tackle, but he wasn't practicing most of the season because he also had an injury. It was not enough to keep him out of games, but it was enough to keep him out of practice, and he got out of shape, and he was slow against speed rushers and all of that. So that was a major issue for the Georgia run game. Our offensive line wasn't really fully healthy at any point, really, and we had trouble gelling because all those injuries forced us to shuffle guys in and out to different positions. It was a mess. It was an absolute mess. Then on top of that, to further complicate matters there, to compound that issue, we had injuries at the running back position. Coming into last year, we go out and make a big splash in the transfer portal and bring in a guy like Trevor Etienne from Florida. And Trevor Etienne was awesome for Georgia when he was healthy, but the guy missed 5 games last year. Okay, now one of them was suspension in the first game of the year, but he got banged up and missed a couple more games later in the season. Then you had Roger Robinson and Branson Robinson that basically missed the entire year. Yeah, Branson played the first couple of games, but you also saw Branson was still not fully recovered from that injury. And then he goes out after a couple of games, and Rod missed the first, 10 games of the year, 9 games of the year, and then comes back, gets a couple snaps late in the season. And again, against UMass, I think was when he made his debut, and then he goes out with another injury. So both those guys who you're counting on to at least be depth pieces for you, they're banged up pretty much the entirety of the 2024 season. And then on top of that, receiver matters too, guys. Pass catchers matter too, because if teams don't have to worry about the pass game, they can load up against the run, and we saw that a lot last year. There was no Brock Bowers. There was no Ladd McConkey. Really no one at wide receiver to really scare anyone due to injuries, due to guys just getting in trouble off the field. We all know how that went. So what that meant was on standard downs, first and second downs particularly, we were consistently facing loaded boxes. Guys, I go back to the Kentucky game. It's really all season long. So I'm in the midst of my offseason film, so I'm going back and I'm rewatching all these games multiple times, watching every position through a watch through, different positions each time. And the Kentucky game stands out most to me. Number one, because it was such a frustrating game being there in that stadium. Because, oh my God, that was a bad Kentucky team and we almost lost to them. But all game long, they were just loading the box and daring us to try to beat them down the field. And we for the most of the game, we did not until late in the game, until the second half. Part of that was just Carson Beckley. We dialed up shots, but Carson, for whatever reason, went to a shell that game and just refused to unleash the ball, especially in the first half. And we also didn't have a ton of guys that were winning consistently on the outside. That's just the reality. So if they don't have to worry about those guys on the outside, they can load up against the run. And we saw that a lot last year, guys. That's why last year was an outlier for Georgia in the run game. I do not believe that that's indicative of some trend that will carry over into the 2025 season. I hope to God, we'll see what happens, man. I don't know, it's a physical sport, but I hope to God that we don't have anywhere near the injuries that we had on the offensive line last year. I hope to God that we don't have anywhere near the injuries that we had at the running back position last year. We go and bring a guy like Josh McCray from Illinois to help with that. Hopefully, fingers crossed, he can stay healthy. I think that we have a lot more playmakers at wide receiver that will allow us to attack vertically down the field and will make teams pay for stacking the box against us, trying to get those numbers on early down. So I don't think that that's a trend that's going to carry over into the 2025 season. And look, yeah, I know devil's advocate could say, well, Tyler, that you might not have as many injuries, but you lost a ton of talented offensive linemen. That's true. You lose Tate Ratledge, you lose Dylan Fairchild, you lose your starting center. You lose some guys, all right, for sure. But we also do return 4 players with starting experience. And we're moving Ernest Green. You guys know how I feel about him at left tackle. I don't think the guy's a left tackle. I don't think he's a tackle really at all. But if he's playing tackle, he's got to play right tackle. And that's what we're doing this year. I think we'll be better at that position. I think that we'll be better at left tackle because Monroe Freeling, who also was banged up last year. I know late in the season it wasn't a great look for him getting that sack against Notre Dame, the sack fumble right before the half. The guy had a labrum tear, man. He had to have a labrum surgery in the offseason. He shouldn't have been out there. But again, we had nobody else. Guys are hurt. Somebody had to play, and he stepped up and he played. But he should be healthy and going to year 3. Let's not forget, guys, this was like a 5-star guy coming out of high school. And I think you're going to see the best version of Monroe Freeling you've seen at the University of Georgia. I feel really confident saying that. And I also think when you talk about the Georgia run game, I think you're failing to account. I think guys like Josh Pate and random fan out there who are down on Georgia coming in 2025, I think you're failing to account for Gunnar Stockton's presence in the Georgia offense. Say what you want about him as a passer, okay? I think you're sleeping on him there. We'll get to that later in the offseason. We already talked about that. We'll get to that a little bit more. But at the very least, his ability to run the football from the quarterback position will enhance the overall effectiveness of Georgia's run game. How many times? Again, let's go back to the Kentucky game. It was not just this game. This was the one that sticks out in my mind. It was all season long. But how many times were Georgia running backs brought down due to unblocked defenders, guys that we could not account for because they outnumbered us in the box? I cannot tell you guys untold number of times last year. And they were unblocked for one of 2 reasons. Either number 1, again, there was no one outside to scare them. I think we're going to fix that this year. Number 2, we had no way to neutralize them by optioning off of them, by taking the numbers back in the box, by retaking that numbers advantage. Because we had a quarterback in Carson Beck, guys, that just be real, like functionally mobile, I guess, could pick up a first down here and there, kind of. But we would run zone read action. He would never pull it. Never. I don't even know if we gave him the option to pull it. Like, we were trying to show zone read, but no one respected it. Go back and watch tape, guys, consistently, game after game, opponent after opponent. When we showed that look, they are crashing. Backside in, backside defender is crashing hard on the run game. There was no way we tried to count for, but they weren't buying what we were selling. And that was a problem for us. That was a major problem. When you insert Gunnar Stockton in the equation, all of a sudden, you have a guy they have to think about. They have to account for. And for evidence of this, guys, let's go back. Let's go back to December. Let's go back to the SEC championship game, okay? And I know we were down the first half, right? Down, 6-3 going into halftime. For evidence of what Gunnar Stockton can do to Georgia's run game, look at the SEC title game. We had -2 rushing yards in the first half. By the end of the game, we had 141 rushing yards. Not a massive amount of rushing yards, but against a really good Texas defense in one half to go from -2 to 141 overall, plus 143 in the second half. What was the obvious difference there? Oh yeah, we had a new quarterback in the game. And oh yeah, that quarterback was a running threat, okay? That's how you do it. Gunnar Stockton is why Georgia was able to go from -2 rushing in the first half in the title game to 141 by the end of the game. His ability to option off defenders and take them out of the run count, to take back the numbers in the box, that was huge for us in opening up plays for guys like ETN, guys like Nate Frazier, who reeled off some big runs in the second half. And we're also, again, going back to what I was talking about a little bit earlier, more equipped to make teams pay for playing those single high looks. They were playing single high looks, guys, on standard downs consistently against us, whether that was man coverage on the outside, whether it was a single high safety with a cover 3 look. They were playing single high looks, trying to get extra bodies in the box on those standard downs. I think that we are equipped this year to make teams pay for trying to defend us like that on those standard downs, because I believe, based on what I saw at spring practice, I saw a couple of practices and saw a G-Day, I'm telling you guys, I truly believe this. We are loaded at the skill positions, and here's what Gunnar does well. Let's bring back his passing ability. You might still have questions about him overall as a passer. One thing this guy does extremely well, and he's already put this on tape, is he throws a gorgeous deep ball, a much more accurate deep ball passer than Carson Beck ever was. So I think we have the receivers that can get open behind defenses if you're going to play single high looks on us. And I think we have the quarterback that can actually put it out there. We also have receivers, not only can they get behind guys, we also have receivers that are built to go up and get the ball. Guys like Noah Thomas and Colby Young. We've got some 50-50 catch machines. So I do believe that we have the ability to pull them out of those single high looks and get guys out of the box. And here's the thing, guys. As bad as Georgia's run game was last year, and it was, admittedly, it was bad. I'm not trying to say it wasn't. I'm just trying to give you context for why it was bad. It was bad. But as bad as it was, we still earned the number 2 overall seed. We still won the SEC. And there is, in my opinion, you can disagree with me, but in my opinion, there is zero chance that our run game is not improved in 2025 for the reasons that I laid out. So if run game issues that owed heavily to injuries on the offensive line, heavily to injuries at the running back position, from a team that still won the SEC title last year, if that's a big factor on why you're down on Georgia entering the 2025 season, you might just be underrating the Dogs. But that's not all that Josh Payton had to say, right? That's just his first reason. The second part of here is starting a new quarterback, okay? Sure, I will grant, again, I don't think Josh Payton's entirely off base here. It's always an unknown. Like, I don't fully know what Gunnar Stockton is going to do, right? And I don't begrudge anyone for being in that, like, quote unquote, wait and see mode. I think generally that's a reasonable, responsible thing to do. And I myself, as I've laid out many times on this podcast over the past couple years, I have been a Gunnar skeptic at times. Like, I'll be absolutely open with you. I have, because like Payton, I'm in wait and see mode, right? And when Gunnar got the job last year, when he came in late in the season, I was hopeful, I wanted to believe, but I needed to see it. And what I would say about myself, and like, you can disagree with me here, I might have a take, but I'm also willing to adjust my opinion based on new information, based on new evidence. And that's kind of how I've evolved with my takes on Gunnar Stockton. Every time I see the guy play, whether it's in the second half of the SEC championship game, whether it's in the full game against Notre Dame, which I thought he performed admirably in a really tough situation, whether it's at practice, during spring practice, whether it's at G-Day, every time I see this guy play, I become more and more of a believer. Why? Because I get more and more information. I get more and more evidence to operate off of, and the guy continues to improve. He continues to take strides, continues to get better. And that new evidence that I see tells me Gunnar Stockton's a guy that I think can be a really effective college quarterback for Georgia. And I also think, here's another factor with Gunnar. I think that Gunnar's skill set, what he brings to the table, gives us the ability to go back to the identity that Mike Bobo has always been most comfortable with calling plays as an offensive coordinator. Bobo's evolved over the years, guys. Whether you want to give him credit for that or not, he has evolved. We run a lot of modern passing concepts. We do a lot of the same stuff that a lot of different teams out there do. But I think if you ask Mike Bobo, hey man, like what do you really want to do? Like, what are you most comfortable doing? Like, if you could pick any identity for the Georgia offense, what would it be? And I think he would tell you, run the football, establish a downhill physical run game, and take play action vertical shots off that and create explosive plays down the field off of play action. And I think that we have the quarterback and the skill talent to do that. Again, I laid it out when we were talking about the run game. I think Gunnar enhances the run game. I think his ability to throw the deep ball is much greater than what we saw from Carson Beck. I think we had the skill players that can also match with his ability to throw the football down the field. So I think it's fair to question, like, okay, Gunnar Stockton, is he going to be a guy that Georgia can win with? I think it's fair to question that, but I would also at the same time point out that Georgia's quarterback from a year ago threw 12 interceptions. He only averaged 7.8 yards per attempt and completed less than 65% of his passes, which back in like 2006, completing 65% of your passes would have been incredible. But it's a different era of football. When you complete less than 65% of your passes and 31% of your passes were screens, that ain't very good, okay? And despite having quarterback that put up those numbers, again, we still won the SEC. I think that Gunnar Stockton's going to be able to create more big plays with the passing game, with his ability to push the ball down the field. I think that he's going to be a more accurate passer outside the hashes than Carson Beck was, and also down the field. And again, we also had no ability. We had a quarterback last year in Carson Beck who had no ability to create, added absolutely nothing to the run game. And again, we still won the SEC. And look, I know people want to have proof of concept when you're making projections because it makes you feel all nice and warm and fuzzy inside, right? Like when you're putting your reputation on the line, you're going out on a limb and saying, hey, I think Georgia might not be as good this year. Like, you want to have proof of concept, right? And I recognize that there's not a ton of that with Gunnar Stockton. I will admit that. But again, Gunnar's going to enhance the run game. He throws a better deep ball. And here's another part of his game that I don't think you can discount. Don't discount the leadership aspect of what Gunnar Stockton brings to the table. Gunnar has the support of the team in a way that very clearly, if you watch Georgia football play week in, week out, like all of us did last year, in a way that, look, I'm not trying to throw shade at Carson Beck, but let's just be real, in a way that Carson Beck did not. You saw that in the SEC Championship game. You saw how that translated on the field. The vibes, how they changed from the first half to the second half, and how Gunnar ignited, sparked that football team. That matters, guys. I'm a firm believer. You might not agree. I'm a firm believer that matters. I believe culture matters. I believe that can be a separator. And when you're talking about the quarterback position, that's the dude at the top. So from top down, it all filters down, man. And I think Gunnar Stockton is made of the right kind of stuff, the stuff that Kirby Smart built this program on. And you just have a feeling that the team is going to embody what Gunnar Stockton brings to the table, which is what Kirby spent the entire spring talking about, saying that we didn't have enough of last year. Fire, passion, energy. Gunnar Stockton embodies that. And I do absolutely think that matters. And then the last part here that I want to address, based on the comments that Josh Pate made, was the Georgia defense, okay? And this is where I'm going to have to read into his comments a little bit. He was pretty clear with the run game and the quarterback, but he wasn't exactly super clear on his criticisms, his critiques of the Georgia defense, because what he said was, I'm going to read the quote again, will they be able to do that while starting a new quarterback and, quote, reestablishing their identity defensively? Okay, a little ambiguous there. Not exactly sure what he means by that. So I'm going to read into it here. I read that as Josh Pate having questions about the top shelf talent that Georgia lost on defense last year, okay, from last year's football team, especially going to the NFL draft. And if you look at our overall returning production based on Bill Connelly's numbers, who does a great job himself, Georgia is only returning 45% of our overall team production and only 48% of our defensive production in particular. But this is where, and I don't use this term in a way to take a shot at anybody. I use it in the truest sense. This is where ignorance of the totality of Georgia's roster comes into play. And again, I say that with all due respect. That's not a shot at Josh Pate. That's not a shot at anyone who's questioning Georgia's defensive talent this year and questioning how Georgia's going to be able to replace all those guys that we lost in the NFL draft. These are national guys, okay? They do a great job covering all of college football. There's a lot of teams out there, guys, all right? There's a lot of teams out there. So when you look at individual teams from a national standpoint, these guys that cover the sport as a whole, they know the headliners on these teams, but they don't really know the ins and outs of a team's roster the way that I do, the way that you do, right? Like that's why guys like me exist, so that we can fill you in on all the ins and outs in a way that the national guys can't, because they just can't do that with all the teams out there in the country. Guys like Josh Pate and Joel Klatt, other people of that ilk, they don't really know about Chris Cole right now. They don't really know about Justin Williams and what this guy is going to do this year for Georgia. They're forgetting about the year 3 rule with the Georgia inside linebackers win the Buckus Award, right? We've got 2 of them that are going into year 3, right? You got CJ, you got Raylan Wilson. They're going into year 3. Good chance that one of them has that breakout year, if not both of them. On the defensive line, they don't really know about Jordan Hall. They forget this guy was a 5-star guy coming out of high school that dealt with 2 stress fractures last year, 1 in each leg, that completely limited what would have been a good year for Jordan. This is year 3 for Jordan Hall, and he's coming out for blood after missing all of last year. Xavier McLeod, the transfer from South Carolina prior to last year, really came on as the year progressed. Again, watching the SEC Championship game again over the weekend, Xavier McLeod was awesome for Georgia in that game. I think he's going to have a big year for the Dogs. They don't know about Gabe Harris stepping into a new role as an edge rusher, what he can bring to the table. They didn't really pay attention to how much Dalen Everett improved down the stretch. I've seen some of these, again, we're in list season. I've seen lists where Dalen Everett's not even mentioned among the top 10 cornerbacks in college football. Maybe you're talking about Dalen Everett from 2023, maybe, but Dalen Everett last 6 games last year, how can you possibly say that man is not a top 10 cornerback in the SEC? But again, they don't know about these guys. They don't know about him yet, right? They don't know about an Ellis Robinson, who was the number 2 player in the country coming out of high school a year ago. They're only starting to become aware of KJ Bolden. They know the name, but they don't really know how good KJ Bolden is going to be for Georgia this year. They don't understand the depth that the Georgia Bulldogs are going to be able to throw at teams this year on the defensive side of the football. Now, I will admit, you can't get around this. The experience is a question. The experience will not be what it was a year ago. That's very, very true. I'm not going to refute that. But I'm also a guy, I've been saying this for years, experience is great. Ideally, you want to have experience. But if I had to choose between talent and experience, I'm going with talent 100 times out of 100. Now, ideally, you want talented experience, but if I had to pick between the two, give me talent, right? In Georgia's last 3 recruiting classes, number 2, number 1, number 2. The talent is there. That's never a question for the Georgia football team, especially on the Georgia defense. The talent is there. And let me use this as an example, okay? Jalen Walker last year had an amazing year, a massive year, a Buckus Award-winning year for the Georgia Bulldogs last year. A season that got him drafted in the top, 15, right? Top 15, should have been the top 10, but hey, Falcons got lucky there. Top 15 of the NFL draft. Well, did the average college football fan, did the Joel Klatts of the world, did the Josh Pates of the world, did they know about Jalen Walker prior to last year? Were they singing his praises? Were they telling everybody, hey, watch out for this guy? Please, somebody find that tape for me. Find the tape of some national guy saying, hey guys, this Jalen Walker dude, I'm telling you, he is going to be a monster for Georgia. He's going to break out. He's going to destroy teams. Find that, because I didn't hear it one single time. But you know who did know? Georgia fans. Georgia fans knew. Why? Because we watch every single game, right? And we know all the guys. Even the guys that aren't starting, aren't playing a ton of snaps, we see what they're able to do when they're on the field. I was screaming from the freaking mountaintops all last offseason. You can find that tape, plenty of it. Go run the tape. Go find it in our podcast, guys. I was screaming from the mountaintops all last offseason about Jalen Walker. I called it like a crime against humanity that he played 12 snaps. How many times did you hear me say this last year? The dude played 12 snaps against Alabama in the SEC championship game. That was a borderline unforgivable offense. And I spent the entire offseason telling you it was incumbent upon our coaching staff to find a way to get that man on the field more consistently, because if you do, he is going to change games. He was the most disruptive defensive player we had in 2023, and we had to find more ways to get him on the field. And you know what? We did, and look at the results. And I don't say that to pat myself on the back. I just say it to illustrate the reality that guys like Josh Pate, guys like Joel Klatt, and other people, I know that I'm using those two primarily because they're the ones that have released their post-spring rankings most recently, but it's not just them out there. But those guys, they just don't know about the depth. They know, sure they know about, like they know what Jalen Walker was this year. They know we lost that guy at first round draft, but they know we lost Michael Williams, right? They know you lose Malachi Starks, but they don't know the depth behind them, okay? The way that you and I do. Georgia fans knew. And we know this roster. So if you're thinking, well, man, Georgia lost 3 first-round draft picks in the NFL on defense. Man, that's just too much to lose. That's just too much to lose. If that's your rationale, if that is your thinking, if that's a big part of why you're down on Georgia, you are underrating this team. Be prepared to be wrong. That's okay. Like, when you make predictions, you can't get them all right. But if you're basing, in a large part, your ranking of Georgia, like Pate, again, having Georgia at number 11 on the reality, on his thoughts that wouldn't go back and read what he said, reestablishing their identity defensively, which whatever that means. If you're thinking, well, Georgia lost a lot of players, they got to reestablish themselves, and I don't know if they can do it, be prepared to be wrong. The pieces, the talent is there. They're just waiting to be unleashed. And everybody's going to find out real quick, just like they found out about Jalen Walker real quick a year ago. And if you want to take it a step further with the Georgia defense, because again, Pate was being kind of vague in his questions about the Georgia defense. If you look at Georgia defense last year and you look at them statistically and say, well, you know what, they just weren't as good. It just wasn't the same caliber Georgia defense that we're used to seeing. And sure, we did finish 30th nationally in total defense last year. And yes, we did give up over 500 yards of offense twice last year, which is very un-Georgia-like. We did against Alabama and Georgia Tech at the end of the season. And look, Alabama, I don't have any defense for that, guys. That was just an incredibly poor performance. I thought that we were poorly prepared. I thought our game plan was bad. I thought that our eye discipline was atrocious. Even guys like Malachi Starks, who you count on, you scheme it up to get him one-on-one the outside with Jalen Milroe, and the guy's got his eyes over there when his job is here to contain Milroe, and he can't do it, and the guy runs for a touchdown. It was a horrific defensive performance. One of the worst defensive performances I've seen in the Kirby Smart era. I have no defense for that. It is what it is. Now, the Tech game, there's some context there. I know Georgia's far more talented than Tech, but we also have to remember, people won't remember this, so just look at the final score and say it was 8 overtimes. But coming to that game, Haynes King, it looked like he was not going to play. The guy hadn't played. He played like a handful of snaps, like single-digit snaps in the previous two games. It's kind of just like a change of pace just to keep teams honest out there. And it looked like he was not going to play against Georgia. The game prior to that, I remember watching the game prior to that. I think it was against NC State that Thursday before our game on Black Friday. He might have played like 8 snaps, maybe. He was entirely ineffective because he couldn't throw the football. His shoulder, like he had an easy touchdown pass if he just get the ball out there. He just couldn't, right? And the idea that he was going to come out and play every snap against Georgia a week later, that was hard to fathom, right? It really was. But some way, somehow, in a rivalry game like that, the dude made it happen, right? And so that was a tough game plan because we were game planning for a different quarterback who played almost the entire game against NC State and played against Miami the week prior to that, most of the snaps in that game. And so that was a tough scout, all right? Now, should we have been able to adapt a little bit quicker? Sure, yes. But when you're preparing for a different quarterback who plays an entirely different style, more of a passer and not as much of a runner, that was tough. Also, the fact it was a short week, and you have an offensive coordinator at Georgia Tech who was at Georgia as an analyst for a long time and knows our defense intimately. There's some context there, right? So you can use that against Georgia if you want to, but I do think there's some context there. But outside of those two games, which were not good performances, I can't really defend that. They were bad. But outside of that, we held Texas, who everyone's so high on this year, right? We held Texas to 178 yards below their season average last year. We held Tennessee which was a playoff team, to 134 yards and 8 below their average and 18 points below their season average. We held Ole Miss. I know Ole Miss beat the brakes off of us, man. But offensively, they didn't run the ball up and down the field on us. We just couldn't do anything offensively ourselves. Their defense just completely stifled our offense. But we held Ole Miss still to 130 yards below their season average. Guys, Clemson won the ACC. Clemson was a college football playoff team. And we held the Tigers to 188 total yards and 3 total points, which was 220 yards and 31 points below their respective season averages. And that was a Clemson team, guys, that after that game, offensively went on a freaking tear. And I know it was the ACC, but that was a really good Clemson offense all year long, and they could do absolutely nothing against the Georgia defense. Notre Dame, I know we lost that game, but it wasn't because our defense played lights out. We held Notre Dame to 244 yards and 16 points. That was 150 yards and 20 points below their season average. We held Notre Dame to fewer yards than both Ohio State and Penn State, who they played following the Sugar Bowl. And in fact, we held them to 140 yards fewer than what Penn State held them to. And everyone talks about how great Penn State's defense is and was. And people think Penn State's like a top 3 caliber team this year because their defense is going to be so great, even though they lost Abdul Carter because they're bringing Jim Knowles over. But Georgia's defense isn't going to be as good, and Georgia's not going to be as good, even though Georgia held that same Notre Dame offense to 140 fewer yards than Penn State did last year with Abdul Carter. I don't know. The reason doesn't seem to line up there, right? And we did all that despite playing seven top 30 offenses, going back to that ridiculous schedule that we had last year. We played 6 top 30 total offenses, and we had about 3 healthy defensive linemen for about half the year. Remember the first half of last year, guys? We had Christian Miller, we had Nas Stackhouse, and we had TID. Those are the 3 healthy defensive linemen we had for a while, guys. They're playing like 70+% of our snaps, which never happens in the Georgia defense. And we still were able to put up those kind of numbers against those types of offenses. And we had a senior inside linebacker in Smile Munden who just got drafted. He also missed 4 games. Michael Williams, who's a top 10 draft pick, was never really fully healthy all year. He played against Alabama. That guy was about 60% maybe in that game. He got hurt week 1 against Clemson, was never really fully healthy all year long. And despite all of that, we still performed very well against some of the best offenses in the country. How many defenses around the country performed that well against that level of competition? How many? Ohio State was great. Okay, the national champion, they deserved it, man. They were the best team last year, most talented team, no doubt. And they were awesome. They were right up there. Texas was really good defensively. They were awesome defensively. But against who? Talk about the red carpet being rolled out for a team in their first year in a conference. Who did they play outside of Georgia? Right? And they lost to us both times, right? Tennessee, same thing. Most of the year, you look at Tennessee's defense and say, man, Tennessee's defense is really good. It's legit, man. Well, what happened to that vaunted Tennessee defense when they actually played teams with a pulse? They actually played good teams. Yeah, what happened? Yep, you saw what happened. So I think Georgia last year, I know the raw numbers will say, oh, Georgia was a top 30 defense. But I think that was easily a top 10 caliber defense adjusted for opponent in the ridiculous schedule we had to play last year. And yeah, again, we're losing some key players. I recognize that. There's no doubt about that. But we also return at least 10 guys with starting experience. I think that by my count, there's at least 8 former 5-stars in what I would project to be Georgia defensive 2 deep, which, by the way, guys, next week I'm going to be releasing my post-spring Georgia defensive depth chart. We did the offense a couple weeks ago. I've gotten distracted with all the recruiting news, but that's coming out next week. So by my count, at least 8 former 5-stars in my projected 2 deep for the Georgia defense coming into the 2025 season. So there you go, guys. That's my answer to these guys that are kind of down on Georgia. And look, Josh Pate's not alone. Joel Klatt's not alone. I think Josh Pate, I'm using his quotes here because he actually kind of articulated, I think, what a lot of people are thinking about Georgia coming into the 2025 season. I think there are a lot of people like Josh Pate who are skeptical about Gunnar Stockton. I know there's people within Georgia's own fan base that are still very skeptical of Gunnar Stockton. So people outside the fan base are. And Josh Pate articulated that. And I think a lot of people like Josh Pate can't quite shake what they saw from the Georgia run game a year ago. But I think what they're failing to understand is our run game issues from last year stand out so much because it's such an anomaly when you talk about Georgia football and what we do, because we always run the ball well. Again, last year was an outlier, and I don't think they're quite grasping that. And there's a lot of people out there like Josh Pate who just can't fathom how the Dawgs can possibly replace all this stellar defensive talent that we lost from last year's team. But as I laid out for you guys here today, if those are the reasons why you are down on Georgia entering the 2025 season, you better be careful. That's all I'm going to say, man. You better be careful because I think the Dawgs are going to vastly overperform those expectations. But we'll see, guys. We'll all see here in a couple of months. But right now, when I see these rankings come out, people have Georgia at number 11, Georgia at number 8. People talking about how Texas is now the team to beat in the SEC. They've surpassed Georgia. You just can't help but wonder, man. Can't help but wonder, is Georgia being slept on entering the 2025 season? And your boy here, me, yeah, I think they are. But all right, guys, thank you so much for being here. Again, if you're a diehard Georgia fan, this is the kind of content that we produce. Go ahead and subscribe to this channel right now. Like, comment, let me know what you guys think. Am I off base here? Is Josh Pate right? Are we being... Is this the Georgia team that's going to take a step back? Or is it, as I suggest, Georgia being underrated entering the 2025 season? Or is it somewhere in the middle? Let me know, guys. Get that conversation started. Love to hear from you guys. But thank you, each and every one of you, so much for being here and checking out this show. But I'm Tyler, and as always, go Dogs!
Man, is there going to be some property destroyed tonight. 26-21. Dogs on top.